How did your approach to job search change?
The intentionality behind networking was the biggest part, that you have to have a really intentional and large pipeline that you're building out at any given time, but that also you're pursuing leads with intentionality as well. There are so many things I could say about sort of how my approach changed during the program, but I think the focus on networking and using my time wisely.
Today, I have a very special episode for you. I'm interviewing David, who was in our coaching program, the Star Candidate, over the last few months. And he is sharing his journey to his brand new senior leadership role in fundraising. The reason I'm so excited to interview David today is because when we first met, he was working full time and he had a busy schedule, but he also had a big goal to move from the US, which is where he's from, to Switzerland to live with his partner, with his husband. And he was already job searching on his own, but he really struggled to see traction. He struggled to stay consistent, and he wasn't really sure how to navigate this big move. And today he's sharing that he actually ended up getting 2 offers before he even moved. The first offer actually came in just 3 months into his time in the program, into his very proactive search. And then that's the offer that he decided not to take. Even though it was a great offer, it was not the right fit. And then 6 months into the program, he signed his second offer. And what's so exciting, he got his second offer, which is what he signed, and now he moved and he is gearing up to start this new job. And what's so interesting about David's journey is that he met now his manager 5 months before he actually signed the offer. There was no role just yet. He just found out that there are going to be growing their team, and he ended up cultivating and nurturing this relationship. And through the entire process, the interview process, the word interview was never even used. So it felt very natural, very organic, very enjoyable. And before we hear David's story, I just want to say that if you are someone who is gearing up to job search right now, who is job searching for that senior role, but maybe you're not seeing enough traction. Maybe you're not getting enough interviews. Maybe you're not converting them into offers. Maybe you want and need more structure, more strategy, and you want to make sure that you're spending your time effectively and you're actually starting to see results in just weeks, just like David. You are in the right place. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes down below for you to book a call with my team. It is free, and it's a call where we dive into your goals, your situation, challenges that you're experiencing in your journey right now, and how exactly we can help. Without further ado, let's hear David's story. Hello, David, and welcome to the Career Dive podcast. So excited to have you here today.
It's great to be here, Anna. Thank you.
All right, David. Well, you were in the Star Candidate program at the end of last year, earlier this year, and I am so excited to talk to you today and share your story because I know you just moved from the US to Switzerland just a couple of weeks ago, and you are starting your new job shortly. But before we get into that, I actually want to take us back, I want to say fall of last year. And when we first connected, I remember that you wanted to make this international move for personal reasons. But I want to hear from you. Where were you mentally with making this change? It is a big career change. What was going on with you and where you were kind of before we started working together?
Yeah, absolutely. I can give a little context there. So, you're remembering correctly. It was fall 2025. And I was at the time planning to move to Switzerland because my husband lives here and was living there. At the time, we had been doing intercontinental long distance for a number of years, actually, by that point. And we had just gotten married the previous spring with the sort of intent of me moving to Switzerland. And so I had already done some very limited networking and job applications on my own, but I was finding that I just wasn't making the progress that I was hoping for. I would apply for one job at a time, very deliberately. Meanwhile, I was going through a very busy period during, in my job that I had in the US. And so I felt like I didn't have a ton of bandwidth mentally, emotionally to take a more proactive and strategic approach. I don't think I ever told you this. I think I'd been following you on Instagram for probably about a year before I
Oh,
even
wow.
signed up for the program. Yeah. And I had always thought your content was really interesting, that it seemed really goal oriented and structured in the way that you approach this type of search, like the one I was doing. Then I think got some sort of email for uh, you about, an opportunity to work together, and was just kind of took the leap of faith and was very glad that I did.
Okay. And just for some context here, what kind of work were you doing in the US?
Sure. So I was working in fundraising, so higher education fundraising, specifically the past few years, operations within that field. And I think it's actually a good question you asked because it's a very American field. Fundraising, and I suppose also like Canada, UK, Australia. There are certain countries in the world where fundraising is a bit more of an industry, so to speak. But I was moving to a country where it was a much smaller playing field, and there were just cultural differences that I had to navigate as well. And so I was open to doing something similar, but also something different. And so that was another thing that the Star Candidate program helped me navigate.
Okay, amazing. So we'll get into that in a few moments. What I want to bring us back to is I remember when you joined the program and we had our kickoff call. Something that you mentioned to me that I still remember was that you weren't sure if you had the time really to dedicate to job search, which is so interesting because you were clearly very motivated to make this move and to make this change from a personal perspective. But there was still something that was kind of holding you back there with really sitting down and being very structured. And I'm just curious, before we started working together, which is actually something I remember we really outlined, okay, where are you going to find this time and how you're going to dedicate this time? That is specifically for job search. But I'm curious, what was kind of coming up for you with, oh, like, I want to do this, but I'm also so busy?
I remember talking about that with you too. I think the main obstacle was I wasn't building the structure for myself. And so I remember during that introductory call, decided then when was I going to be doing this? And I decided it was going to be before work. And for a long time, actually, in the program, I stuck to that. Uh, and I think part of it is I had experience doing similar extracurricular pursuits. Let's say I was a serious writer for a long time. I've done fitness, things where it was always the morning before work, actually, when I would sit down and do that. So I thought, okay, this is going to be my before work project for the next several months. And that was very helpful. But I think part of it was also being patient with myself when I did not, um, you know, there were weeks at a time where I did not stick to that because life has a way of, throwing you off sometimes, and being not so perfectionistic about it, but still having that same intent was a good balance that I ended up striking.
Thank you for sharing that because I think this is something that happens with a lot of people who are working full time and have life commitments and really want to make this career move, and they realize, okay, this needs to be intentional and this is something that I need to be putting in time every single week, but it just feels like where do I find this time? So I remember us talking about, okay, where in your day do you have the energy? Where can we realistically commit to it? And I remember you would always be the first person to post in the threads because I knew, oh, you're up early. So I saw that you were really sticking to it. So now let's talk about, so you were kind of a little bit job searching on your own, applying here and there, and then you join the program and we kind of talk through this very specific plan and where you're going to dedicate time to job search. So talk to me about what has changed from the moment you joined the program. How did your approach to job search change?
I think that the intentionality behind networking was the biggest part. I actually worked in sales very early in my career, just for a couple years, and I developed a real admiration for people who develop that skill set. I think that the approach to job search was a lot like sales, where you have to, well, and actually like fundraising. So I was familiar with it from that angle as well, that you have to have a really intentional and large pipeline that you're building out at any given time. But that also you're pursuing leads with intentionality as well. Like, I think one thing that I ran into a lot in my earlier days before the program was people would come up to me and say, "Oh, I know someone who lives in Switzerland. Like, you should talk to them." And sometimes that's a good idea, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes, like, you only have so many hours in the day, and talking to someone who doesn't really have uh, a stake in the field. There are so many things I could say about sort of how my approach changed during the program, but I think the focus on networking and the real intentionality that I put into it and using my time wisely, all part of the approach and how it changed.
And then how was it job searching and networking? And you and I have talked about how, networking will be the biggest piece for you in making this international move. How was it networking in a different country, in a different time zone, without necessarily being there in person?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was not always easy, and I think I sometimes was envious of people in the program who were looking to stay in the same city that they already lived in, or even in the same industry as well. And I was often trying to reach out to people who were 6 hours ahead of me. I had the fortune, at least, of visiting a couple of times while I was in the program, and I structured trips around the times I was there and filled it with visits with people. But I still would encounter objections, like people saying, "Well, why don't you let me know when you move here? Why don't you don't live here yet?" They wouldn't really take me as seriously sometimes. But I was able to counter a lot of those objections and actually made some really great relationships with people before I even moved here. And as I got my job offer before moving to Switzerland, which was, I think, a testament to the work that I put into building the relationships. And then also, I think people undersell themselves a lot in what they have to offer. And I think I had things to offer as well.
Thank you for sharing that. I think this is something that comes up for a lot of people that, hey, no one is responding to me, or networking is so hard. And your story of making it work across the globe, really, and getting people to respond to you, to connect with you. And I know you were very intentional with some of those conversations virtually, and then making sure that you follow up and actually make them happen in person as well. That's just a testament to you and to your persistence, and really trusting the process that it is possible. So talk to me about this offer that you got.
Sure. So I started the conversations for that offer probably, I actually did the math about 5 months before the offer came through. So that was actually another thing that the program helped with, was putting a sense of realistic expectations in terms of the time that it takes to nurture relationships and then get a job offer when you're traveling internationally. And so it actually, the first conversation was through, I got introduced to the hiring manager through a headhunter who I had used for an entirely different position, where I had not made it to the offer stage. And so I'd noticed that they had posted another position in Switzerland. They worked with fundraising across Europe, essentially, and I think Asia as well. I just wrote her a quick email saying, "Hey, I noticed that you're also, recruiting for this other school. Tell me a bit about them." the position doesn't honestly look like a match for what I'm looking for, but just thought I'd reach out. And that actually led to her saying, "Oh, this hiring manager is looking to build out her team in the next few months. I should just introduce you." And then that led to, while I was on my first trip to Switzerland, I was already planning these other visits and got an email from this person saying, "Yeah, come visit our campus," which was actually a 3-hour train ride away from where my partner lived. But I went with it and, made a day trip out of it. I may have tacked on another visit as well in that same town. I'm trying to remember. But anyway, that led to a series of conversations. And at that point, I was in the program. So I learned how to sort of progress those conversations in a way that advanced my interest, but also like help this other person learn about me, help me learn about them and what they were trying to achieve, and just get more of a sense of whether it was a mutual match. And so by the time they were looking to hire earlier this year, we already had this rapport. We were, I think, had sort of this sense that we could work well together. There was just, I think, much more of a foundation than going in cold, which is what I was used to from other application processes.
And I remember that you have had a number of conversations with them before, and I remember there was a point where you weren't sure. Okay, is this even an official interview, or are we still just chatting
Yeah.
here? But it was so powerful because I remember you were building, your impact preview deck, and you were just really coming into the process so well informed and prepared and feeling like, yes, I do feel like this can be a good opportunity for both of us. So it's really, really cool to see that you stuck with it, that it was a bit of a, some might argue, a long game. But on the grand scheme of things, this is amazing that really this, it sounds like it felt very organic and
Mhm.
natural and not really chasing something, not really forcing something, but really looking for the right fit, the right opportunity, the right relationship, the right manager, the right team. And it sounds like it worked out really well.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. The organic piece. There were other points in the process where I was pursuing other leads, let's say, and I just felt there was something in my gut that told me that it wasn't quite right. And, I think another thing that I took away from this process is like, I don't know whether those other things were right or not. And to be perfectly frank, like this, I'm very excited about this opportunity I'm about to pursue, but who knows what will happen with that. I think that just having a sense of ease about the whole thing, an openness to experiences playing out as they will, and just trying to make the best decisions I can in the moment with the information I have. It's a good life skill that extends beyond looking for a job.
And when you mentioned that there were opportunities that didn't feel right, which reminds me that there was an offer that you
Yeah.
got in December, so about 3 months in, that you decided not to take. And for a lot of people, getting an offer, a good offer,
Yeah.
um, abroad when that's the big goal, and then say no to it is unheard of. So, can we go back to that moment? Because I know there was a lot of back and forth, and there was it was a scary decision for you to say no to it. So I'm curious, what what helped you make that decision, especially considering how big the goal to make this international move was.
Yeah, you're entirely right. It was terrifying. It was very scary to say no to that offer. It was a good offer. I genuinely respected the organization and the team. I think what allowed me to say no was knowing that I had the structure of this job search process, that I felt like I was just getting good at it. And in a way, I felt that there were still unvalidated things that I felt about the Swiss market that I needed to like further research and explore in these conversations. And I knew that if I accepted, it was a very demanding job, and I knew that if I took it, I would probably be in that job for a while, and not really be able to learn what I wanted to about the overall Swiss job market, which I think actually will serve me well even beyond this job. You know, if I do another one, I've built a bigger network now. I just know more about the players that, I will, it's a small place. I'll probably continue to interact with them over time, and it just felt premature to me. And I think if I didn't have such a structured way of going about the job search, I probably would have taken it, but sort of felt deep down a sense of ambivalence, which I don't know, that doesn't always go away even when after you make the decision, but it would have been stronger if had I accepted the offer. And so obviously now, and with hindsight, I could go back and say I'm glad I didn't.
But I just want to celebrate you because I know it's scary and most people probably would have said yes. But just the fact that you had the confidence in yourself and in the process that, hey, I've done this once, I can do this again, and there is something that is a better fit. And something that stood out to me about what you just said was that, hey, now I've met people, I've built a network, I know people on this market, so I feel much better going into it. And if I were to do it again, I know where to go and who to go to. And that's something that we talk about often in the program, that it feels like, well, I'm doing a lot. This is a lot of outreach. This is a lot of conversations. And something that I keep reminding you guys is that it's not just for this one job, it's you setting yourself up for success in the future so that this is not a problem again. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did.
Yeah, it was definitely it was a good process just to introduce me to this area and the industry at large, not just this one opportunity I ended up taking.
And then you mentioned in the beginning that you realized that your experience in fundraising was very, specific to North America, and it wasn't as much of a thing in the market that you were transitioning to. So how did that play out with your new offer, and how did that experience transfer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it actually led to a really interesting dynamic throughout the job search where my experience was actually very highly valued within a very specific industry. And so I was lucky enough to work for an organization that had really strong brand recognition. And so I think that opened a lot of doors, honestly, in my conversations here. But then specifically within fundraising, I think that my expertise was highly valued among people who worked in that field here. And so that helped open doors to get meetings here. But what it meant from sort of a job, like I was able to talk to a lot of people, but when it came to the actual job availability, there were far fewer jobs here than in the US in that field. And a lot of them had language requirements that I couldn't meet in French and German, especially. And so it did narrow the playing field quite a bit. And so the institutions that I had the most serious conversations with, including the one where I ended up getting an offer and accepting it, were places where the working language is English. And it so happens that the person who will be my boss in a couple weeks is another American. And but it's a very international workplace. So I'm looking forward to sort of having that mix of someone who understands the background I come from, but also getting to learn from all these other perspectives that I'll encounter in the workplace.
So, wow, it sounds like what you kind of had to target was actually quite niche and quite small. It sounds like the market altogether is small to begin with. And then we're looking at your very specific expertise, and we're looking at constraints with the language requirement. So there were quite a few things that sounds like made it harder for you, but you still through this persistency and through meeting the right people and really staying on top of it week over week, you made it happen. So amazing.
Yeah, I think that's about right. It was quite niche, but in a way, I think that there are probably I could probably count on one hand the number of jobs that were even available in sort of as directly related to what I was doing as the job that I ended up taking that met sort of my criteria, and yet here I am. So
Yeah.
definitely a testament to the work and the process.
Absolutely. And it makes me think back to what you started with is meeting the hiring manager 5 months ahead of time.
Yeah.
So I am thinking that especially in something very niche, very specific, very targeted, this becomes even so much more important to know these people and have those connections and relationships ahead of time so that when that one, two, three opportunities do come up, they know you already and you're well positioned. And how was your interview process going through this experience? Because I know that it started a little bit casual in the beginning. And how was the rest of that experience?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was definitely different from a traditional process in that I didn't go into each step fully. It wasn't clearly stated what the purpose of it was. And so I actually think that's an important skill for people to develop when they network their way into a job is that flexibility of going into a conversation, being able to just put your best foot forward, but not necessarily be okay not knowing what the result will be. And so what that looked like in practice was there were a few Zoom calls where they were really just touch points between my first visit and what ended up being the quote unquote second interview. There were just a couple Zooms where I presented impact preview decks. I learned a lot more about her vision for the team, and I shared some of my background. And that was really the only like interview experience I had with the hiring manager. My second visit, I said, why don't I visit the next time I'm in Switzerland? And then I found out that basically a day was planned for that visit where over the course of, I don't know, like half a day or so, I met maybe 6 to 10 people. Um, and so by that point, it was very clear that this was an interview of some kind, whether it was, you know, a formal one or not. Like they were taking me very seriously as a potential addition to their team, but they still didn't use the word interview. They used the word visit. And so,
Crazy.
yeah, and
That's
I was actually,
different. That's
no,
probably very different from what you have experienced in the past.
it is. And I think I remember you saying in the program, part of that was the more senior you get, the more experiences like that you're probably going to have, where you have these informal visits instead of formal interviews. And then there are rules in Switzerland about when you can extend a job offer. After that visit, I applied formally for the position. Then, about a month later, had my final round interview with the senior most person at the institution. I went into that not knowing if they were going to be extending an offer, if it was an interview. I remember you very calmly talking me off the ledge as I sort of freaked out, not knowing how to handle this conversation. But the guy was very nice and we really hit it off. And the offer came shortly after that.
So good. So good. And then reflecting back on this journey, what would you say was the most valuable part of the program for you specifically in this experience?
So I would say part of it is just the structure of doing the job search, the networking, the like methodical nature of like how the job search was done. I think like that's a structure and a process that I can reuse if well, I should say when I next, you know, want to you know, switch to a new position. Um, but I think beyond that, what was really helpful too was just some of these softer skills that actually came up in coaching even more, I would say, than the, you know, more technical pieces, which is like comfort with ambiguity, you know, being okay with rejection, like really the ambiguity, I think, is a big one that kind of gets overlooked. It really extends to other parts of life. It just so happens that as I was going through this program, I also was going through a pretty tumultuous time at my day job, the job that I ended up leaving. I was planning an international move. There was a lot going on that required this same comfort with just not knowing what will happen. And so this was great practice in that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I guess my final question to you is, would you recommend the program to others?
Absolutely, 100%. I am happy to be a cheerleader for the program. I am quite a big fan.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're obviously a big fan of you and really saw you week after week. I know you said, there were weeks when you were not as on it, but what I saw was a lot of consistency and a lot of persistence and showing up and asking questions and being open and vulnerable and open to feedback and open to doing things that maybe didn't feel very comfortable. So really going outside of your comfort zone. And that's really, from my perspective, what it takes to make a big move and really learn new skills and step up. So you were open to it and you were putting in the work. So hence the result. So celebrating you.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and wish you all the best in your new space, in your new role. Can't wait to hear more about it as you get more settled in.
Thanks so much, Anna.